Bom dia a todos e a todas, educadores, educadoras do Colégio Santa Cruz, educadores convidados, amigos da nossa comunidade. É uma grande alegria e uma honra recebê-los aqui, professor Jan Masschelein, diretamente da Bélgica, e o professor José Sérgio, que já nos acompanha em algumas jornadas aí. Fico muito contente de o Santa Cruz ser a sede desse encontro e desejo a todos nós um grande aprendizado nessa manhã de sábado. Só um encontro como esse poderia trazer tantos educadores numa manhã de sábado, uma manhã chuvosa de sábado. Débora, muito obrigado por organizar esse encontro maravilhoso.
Eu é que agradeço o privilégio. Preciso contar para vocês, nesse início de manhã, uma breve história. Nós recebemos o professor José Sérgio, o ano passado, em nosso congresso de abertura do ano, e se instalou ali uma questão não pela primeira vez, ele nos acompanha já há alguns anos, sobre a escola, sobre o lugar da escola em tempos tão complexos, sobre o lugar de cada educador e da instituição como um todo. E naquele momento já nasceu um desejo de, e se estudássemos um pouco mais a fundo num grupo? E eu já disse isso para ele naquele momento, e em outros momentos que eu tive com muitos de vocês, começou a nascer a ideia de que a gente organizasse um projeto que hoje se chama Trilhas Formativas. Como é que a gente ouve, em um momento como esse, uma fala importante, mas como a gente se organiza depois para estudar em pequenos grupos um pouco mais sobre o que a gente ouviu. Então, nós organizamos um foco para 2022, que é a educação e o seu compromisso com a diversidade, com a equidade e com a democracia. E estamos terminando a 5ª trilha, essa é a 4ª trilha, Escola e Democracia, e nós estamos terminando a 5ª trilha com a professora Flora Perlman. Então, nós fizemos uma trilha sobre educação para as mídias, que foi aberta pelo professor Eugênio Butti, 4 encontros com a professora Flora Perlman, o último encontro aberto em agosto, vocês serão todos convidados. Nós fizemos uma trilha com a abertura da professora Rachel Loughton, diretora do curso de pedagogia durante anos em Stanford, que nos fez um convite a pensarmos na equidade em salas heterogêneas, uma trilha em parceria com o Instituto Rodrigo Mendes sobre planejar é incluir, acompanhados pela equipe do Núcleo de Educação de Práticas Inclusivas do Colégio Santa Cruz, a trilha com a Flora Perlman, acompanhados pelo Núcleo de Educação Digital, na trilha com a professora Rachel Loughton, pela Silvia Camargo, professora do Ensino Fundamental 1 do Colégio, e uma trilha sobre ações antirracistas, com a professora Clélia Rosa, a professora Mildred e Miriam, do nosso colégio. Então, todas as trilhas, nós recebemos convidados para falas de abertura, para nos acompanharem nos encontros de estudo, e temos sempre professores e educadores da escola envolvidos nesse projeto. Hoje a gente tem esse privilégio aqui, eu tive a oportunidade de ser apresentada ao professor Jan Masschelein, os seus textos pela minha professora, Cleide do Amaral Terci, e depois pela Renata, querida, que trouxe o professor Jan Masschelein para uma conversa entre amigos durante a pandemia, e eu tive a certeza que eu precisaria estudar muito mais o que ele produz de reflexão, de pesquisa sobre a educação. Hoje a gente tem aqui a Aline Ferreira, professora do Colégio Santa Cruz, da equipe do Fundamental 1, que planejou, acompanhou, cuidou, mediou, amparou com a Mônica, que é coordenadora pedagógica do ensino médio do Colégio de Santa Cruz e professora de matemática. Elas formaram esse trio com o professor José Sérgio, e foi muito bonito ver o trabalho deles durante todo esse semestre, construindo os encontros com mais de 60 professores do Colégio Santa Cruz. Ouçam, vou deixar gravado, às sextas-feiras à noite, com uma insistência, quase que exigência do professor José Sérgio, de encontros presenciais. Então, nós vivemos aí momentos de muito aprendizado. Desejo uma aula muito potente hoje aqui, nesse encontro bonito da Universidade Brasileira, com a Universidade Belga, com educadores que pensam e defendem a escola como um lugar, um exercício que confirme o nosso desejo, o nosso anseio por democracia. Quero agradecer muito aos colegas que nos acompanham. A Carolina Menandro nos acompanha diretamente de Curitiba, tempos digitais temos vivido. Para vocês poderem ter acesso à tradução simultânea, tem um globinho aí na barra de ferramentas, abaixo do Zoom. Peço que vocês cliquem em português, se vocês quiserem acompanhar a tradução simultânea do encontro de hoje. Muito obrigada. Desejo, como eu já disse, uma manhã de reflexão para todos nós.
Bom dia. Fiquei responsável aqui por apresentar, então, o nosso palestrante, né, de honra, o Jan Masschelein, e o professor José Sérgio, que é nosso velho conhecido, mas, de qualquer forma, vamos aqui com essa tarefa de trazer um pouquinho de cada um deles. O professor José Sérgio Fonseca de Carvalho é professor titular de Filosofia da Educação da Universidade de São Paulo, na qual também é pesquisador do Instituto de Estudos Avançados. E ele também é pesquisador convidado das universidades de Paris 7 e 8. Destaco aqui a coordenação do grupo de estudos e pesquisa sobre educação e pensamento contemporâneo na Universidade de São Paulo, na Faculdade de Educação, como uma das atividades de pesquisa realizada lá na universidade. Já o professor Jan Masschelein, ele é professor titular, professor titular de filosofia da educação e diretor do Laboratório para Educação e Sociedade da Universidade de Louvain, na Bélgica. As áreas de seu maior interesse são teoria educacional, teoria crítica e filosofia social. Atualmente, concentra seus estudos no papel público e no significado da educação. Ele é autor de diversos artigos e livros sobre esses temas, e eu destaco entre eles Em Defesa da Escola, uma Educação Pública, e A Pedagogia, a Democracia e a Escola, ambos publicados em parceria com Martin Simons e traduzidos em português e publicados pela editora Autêntica. Então é isso, boa palestra para nós.
Bom, muito bom dia a todos, obrigado, Aline. A Aline esqueceu de pôr no meu currículo que eu fui orientador de mestrado dela. Foi um prazer poder voltar a trabalhar com a Aline nesse caso, e com a Mônica também, de quem eu fui colega no ensino médio. Mas antes, então, de falar um pouquinho, a minha fala vai ser muito rápida, só situar a fala do Jan nesse nosso curso, mas eu queria, se Débora e Fábio me permitem, só uma pequena palavra sobre a importância social, política e formativa do Colégio Santa Cruz firmar esses grupos de estudos que, para mim, são mais do que simplesmente um interesse teórico nos temas da pluralidade, da democracia, da equidade. Elas significam um compromisso político. E tal como o próprio Ian fala, que a gente vive um momento em que é preciso defender e desejar a escola, eu acho que a gente vive hoje um momento em que é preciso desejar, defender e lutar por esses princípios de uma vida política, de um viver junto aos outros, sob a égide da democracia, do Estado de Direito, do desejo de uma sociedade mais igual. Então, eu queria aqui, não acho que é parabenizar, é mandar um grande abraço a vocês, solidário por essa luta que vocês fazem, dentro do escopo que nos é possível, que é pensar isso a partir da escola. Então, como eu tinha dito, a minha ideia aqui é só colocar, bom, no que entra esta fala do professor Jan Masschelein na trilha que a Débora colocou, né? Enfim, eu recebi, então, esse convite da Débora e depois trabalhei com a Mônica, com a Aline, nessa ideia. Como é que a gente pensa os vínculos entre educação e democracia, para além de uma certa repetição exaustiva e, às vezes, semanticamente esvaziada da necessidade da escola se comprometer com a democracia, ou seja, primeiro reduzindo, às vezes, a própria noção de democracia à simples regra da maioria ou a certos ritos de votação, que são importantes, mas que estão longe de compreender a democracia como um fenômeno político ou social, e também a natureza dos vínculos que a escola, na especificidade da sua atuação, tem com a democracia, que também, de novo, não pode ser reduzida, embora possa contar, não pode ser reduzida a uma assembleia estudantil ou a preparação do indivíduo, do cidadão para a vida democrática, né? E aí a gente fez uma opção, né, conjunta, que era iniciar os nossos debates por um rápido exame sobre a palavra democracia, tal como a concebe um dos maiores filósofos franceses da atualidade, que é Jacques Rancière, né? Então, a gente abriu com isso, pensar a palavra democracia e pensar como essa palavra dialoga com a escola. E a seguir, a gente teve 4 encontros nos quais nós debatemos 2 textos do professor Jan Masschelein e por que essa escolha, né? Claro, tem uma profunda admiração, tanto minha quanto da Débora, a Aline também já conhecia bastante o trabalho do Jan. Por quê? Porque de um tempo para cá, aí de uns 5, 6, 7 anos, eu não sei precisar exatamente, a gente acabou tendo algum grau de cooperação bastante intenso, né? Então, a gente participou de congressos conjuntamente, eu, o professor Jan Masschelein, em determinada ocasião eu tive a oportunidade de visitá-lo na Bélgica, fazer uma entrevista que será publicada aqui. Eu também, o nosso grupo de estudos traduziu 2 dos seus textos, que um foi e outro será publicado agora em livros desse grupo. Então, a gente foi desenvolvendo aí uma certa colaboração, mas é sobretudo porque me parece que o professor Jan Masschelein é hoje, seguramente, o pesquisador que, no meu entendimento, melhor articula o pensamento de Jacques Rancière, que não é propriamente um pensamento pedagógico, educacional, ele se dedica muito mais a pensar as questões da política e da estética, mas eu acho que ninguém, como o professor Jan, foi capaz de pensar a especificidade do escolar a partir das intervenções polêmicas do Jacques Rancière, né? Então, ele pensa junto com, às vezes ele pensa, digamos, entre aspas, contra, no sentido, ele apresenta visões da especificidade escolar que escapam, ao meu ver, à própria visão do Jacques Rancière, e produz textos que, para nós, são muito importantes, porque são textos que, embora reconhecendo a pertinência de certas críticas que foram feitas à educação nos anos 50 e 60, recuperam o valor, o sentido, o significado social e político da experiência escolar, da especificidade disso que é o tempo e espaço escolar. Então é isso, eu vou passar agora a palavra ao Jan e depois eu fico aqui para acompanhar o debate, as perguntas que vocês possam ter ao professor Jan, ok? Então, Jan, é um prazer tê-lo aqui conosco mais uma vez.
Thank you very much. I have to share my screen again, I think. I have to see. Okay. Yeah, good morning for you, good afternoon here in Belgium. So thank you very much for inviting me. I apologize that I speak in English. I will try to speak not too fast because I understood that some of you will also try to follow me in English, although there is a translation in Portuguese. Maybe José has already introduced a little bit what I am doing or what it is going to be about. But nevertheless, I think it is important that I say that what I'm going to say is, of course, starting a little bit from my background. And I know for sure something about the Brazilian context, but I am not I am not working in that context. So it could be that some of the things that I say don't cross your experiences. So that could be very well the case. But I hope we have the time to discuss it. Thank you also very much to inviting me. It is a very special always to hear that people have been dealing with one's texts, and that you have even studied these texts, and that now I can also try to say something about it. Of course, these texts are not my texts anymore. They are public, so you can think about them what you want. You can do with it what you want, and I do not claim that I can explain everything that is written there. In the preparation for this meeting, Jose told me that there were three issues that came up in the discussion about the texts. So one was about the role of the teacher and the idea of the pedagogue. Another was about what exactly are now the operations of the school. What is the school actually performing or doing? And a third one, if I understood it well, was the relation to the actual situation, of course, and to the way in which you could say that maybe school is now transformed, or that there are tendencies to transform the school into kind of production unit, now really into a learning factory. So these are three things that I'm going to talk about. Let me maybe first say something about the approach. So what I'm going to offer, and as has been said already, the things that I'm going to offer are developed and elaborated in very close cooperation with my colleague Martin Simons. And we conceive of what we try to do is indeed very parallel to what Jacques Rancière is trying to do. We conceive of it not so much as a theory, just as also Rancière is not giving a kind of theory of democracy or a theory of politics, but we conceive of it as a kind of intervention through, of course, using words, ideas, but also histories and fables. So not in order to develop a theory of the school, but in order to address the way we perceive the school in the present. And the school seems to be very controversial and polemical on the one hand, but on the other hand, you could say that there are many images and words that already occupy our thinking about the school, and who have already installed all kinds of ways of looking and understanding the school. So many images, many words that already occupy the way in which we understand the school. And so what we tried to do as a kind of intervention is to see whether we can, in a certain sense, try to give another taste to the notion of school, and make the school itself, so to say, speak. Because in fact, a lot of discussion about the school, a lot of thinking about the school, it's not really about the school in the sense that the school is practically very often seen as a instrument to realize some aims, or to realize some functions, or to perform some functions which are defined outside of school. So school is instrumental. For example, if you take a kind of sociological approach or a psychological approach, then school is instrumental in the case of sociology or the sociological approach. School is instrumental or functional for the reproduction of a society. or the socialization of people into societies. And so this process of socialization and the social order can be defined outside school, and the school can play a role in the reproduction or the socialization for that order. Or if you take a psychological approach, you could say that that psychology is conceiving of all kinds of processes, the processes of development, of social development, cognitive development, emotional development, intellectual development, and so on. So all kinds of development processes that can be studied and are discussed by psychology, and then the school can play a role in these processes or in these developments. So it can be detrimental, or it can be functional to improve or to support these processes, but these processes are defined outside. And so the school seems to have no voice in itself, or to produce nothing in itself. And so that is something that we precisely would like to do, is to try to recall that the school is a form of togetherness, you could say, a form of gathering, of bringing together people and things. It is a form that, as a form, performs some things. There are some operations that are enacted by this form, and that have a life of themselves, and there are particular operations which are typical for this form, for what we could call the school form, which in fact these are operations which are enacted in the sense that the togetherness, the bringing together, that it becomes a happening. Or to say it in a different way, school for us is a form that is operating in a certain way and makes something happen. That what it makes happen, you could say, is that it shapes a particular kind of time, which has a particular relation to the usual time, or to the social time, you could say, and I'm going to develop that a little bit. So, but I take as a, and I'm not sure to what extent I can do that, but so I assume that most of you have read these texts, or have at least have some idea of what they are about. So I'm not going to recall everything that is in this text, but I'm going to try to add something to this idea that so school is doing something particular. Try to give the school, the notion of school, a different taste. I hope you can try to start to think a little bit different about school. And so that is not to say, and also Jose has already referred to it, that is not to say that you cannot, of course, critique the school in many ways, and that has been done and is being done until now. Very often, that the school, that we should get rid of the school, that the school is something of the past, and if it is not of the past, then it is only reproducing inequalities and so on. You know all these critiques about the school. But in order to defend the school, and we think that it is important to defend the school, I think it is important to try to tell a little bit another story about the school, and that is what I want to do. And wait, I have to see here. Why it is not going. Okay, so that's what I want to do, and I hope you apologize me that I'm going to tell, or to go back to what you could call the time of the invention of the school, which is not by accident the same time as what you could call the invention of democracy as a particular way to deal with the issues of living together. And it's a very particular way to make decisions or to try to decide about how we live together and how we manage our living together. So you could say that the school is a very particular way to deal with the question that every society has to deal with, how to deal with newcomers in that society. And in this case, you take them, we take them to school. And I go back so to the period of the invention, to the invention of the school. And I want to start with this figure of the pedagogue. So this notion of pedagogy, or the pedagogue, or the pedagogical, is going back to the Greek, to the figure which we call the pedagogue. The pedagogue who appears, the pedagogue is who appears in Greece in the same period as the privileges of the aristocrats and the noble to have so-called free time, which is the literal translation, or the first translation, you could say, of this notion of school, of escola, as it is called in Greek. So it is an indication of time. So the pedagogues appear in the same period as the privileges of the aristocrats and the noble to have free time. That means time to deal with the world, you could say, and to shape oneself, to study, to exercise. That this free time, that this privilege of the aristocrats was questioned and in a certain sense abolished, and that it was no longer a privilege of these of the aristocrats and the noble, but that in a certain sense, this free time became available for all citizens. And just to make sure, so I am very much aware that the Greek polis was a polis which knew a lot of exclusion, that women had no position, or that there were slaves and so on. That so, and I'm aware of that, so I'm not going to go too much into that. But I think that it is important to see that the invention of the school was a way to offer and to provide free time, so time to study and to exercise, to those who, according to their place in the society, were supposed rather to work and not to have free time. And so that was a kind of attack on the privilege of aristocrats and of the noble. And so the pedagogue, which appears in this context, is the one who takes the sons, first of all the sons, but there were also the daughters now and then, but the sons from the home to the school. So the pedagogue enabled the children to go out of the home, to go to the school. And they brought them, so they lead them out of the house, out of the home, to the school. And the school I would like to use this image which offers a kind of way to think about the school, where you could say that what the pedagogue is doing is taking the child out of the home, out of the house, and bringing it to the middle. You see here the crossroads and the middle, to bring to the middle, and to bring that to the middle and to protect that middle, and in a way try to make sure that that middle functions and operates in a certain way. And I think it's interesting here to see that there is a difference, and going here the next, there is a difference between the pedagogue and the teacher. So in this image, you see that you could say that the teacher is the one that is sitting here, and that the pedagogue is the one who is sitting here. So the pedagogue is the one who brings the child to the school, but is remaining in the school in a certain sense to make sure that the school remains a school. And now, in order to clarify a little bit what this middle is doing and what this school is doing and the role of the teacher in that school, I would like to relate it precisely to this context in which the school was invented. So the context in which the school was invented, let's say very roughly 5th, 4th century before Christ, in the Greek city-state in Athens, so to say. In that context, it was very important. One of the most important things was speech, was to speak well. You had to speak, and you had to use words. You have to speak in many different contexts. Of course, so in the context of the democracy, you had the councils, the many councils in which Athens decided about what was going on in the city. You had, of course, the tribunals, the courts that were also started in the same place where you had to defend your cause. You had, of course, the marketplace where you had to sell or to buy things anyway. So the use of words, speaking well, what you could call also rhetorics, speaking well was very important in that context. It was something that had a very strong influence on your life and how you organized your life and how you also organized your personal but also the collective life. So you could characterize it as a kind of situation where you have a kind of stream of speech. The stream, the speech is everywhere. Words are everywhere. And so it was important to speak well, to make your argument in the court, convince others in the councils of what you wanted to be decided, to have impact, to defend your interests. And in that context, we see also that appeared teachers that, of course, were trying to help people or to teach people how to speak well. You could call them the sophists who tried to develop all kinds of practices to teach people to speak well. But I think it's important to see that these teachers, these sophists, they offered most of the time, in fact, almost exclusively oral teaching. So it was oral, that it was very irregular because it were teachers that were moving on the move all the time. And so you had to know when they would pass by to be able to contact them. And their teaching was also in most of the time individual. It was a one-to-one student relationship. Now, it is in this context that we now have to see what the invention of the school is. And for the invention of the school, we don't have to refer to Socrates, but we have to refer, as maybe many of you maybe know, rather to Isocrates. And what did Isocrates do? Isocrates, I think you can call Isocrates in some way the inventor of the school. And what he did is that he created a conditions in which this tremendous important force in the lives of the Athenians: speech, the force of words, the force that can start wars, that can make you win battles in the courts and so on. What he did was to enable this force to be studied and exercised in a different way. And in that context, we have to see that this was made possible also because, in contrast to, for example, Plato or Socrates, if you want, that in contrast to Plato or Socrates, Isocrates emphasized or used very the force of writing. Writing, the alphabetic writing, which was also more or less was not precisely invented at the same time, but it was becoming also very popular at that moment. And so you have the invention of the writing, and writing allows you to precisely, in a certain sense, literally grammatize, write down, because that is the origin of the grammar. So to write down what you say. So now speech is not only something that you can listen to, but it is also something that you can read. It is something that you can reread. It is something that you can stop, that you can look at again, that you can come back to it. So if you have only the oral, it is like a stream. It is a stream of sounds. It is a stream of sounds, and it is very difficult to even just simply to recall or to know what has been said. For example, if you have not noted down anything of what I said now, and if I would ask you, could you tell me what I said 2 minutes ago, it would be very difficult, I think, to do that. But if you write it down, you have the possibility to come back to things. You have the possibility to correct things, to say, yes, but you said that, and I noted it, so you can control something. So the writing made it possible to have a very different, or helped to have a different relationship to the stream of words. What Isocrates did was so bringing the speech in the written form in a gathering where young people came together to study these words. He introduced a kind of a fixed place and a fixed time, so it was not that you had to wait until by accident the sophist teacher came by, or that you heard that he were there, but there was a fixed time and a fixed place, and also there was starting a kind of fixed the start of a fixed curriculum. And it is interesting to note that the curriculum were what Isocrates considered texts which were worthwhile to discuss, and that were the texts that were not in the first place the texts of the gods, but it were the texts of the orators who had played an important role in the democratic life of Athens. So that were the texts that were studied there. And Isocrates invented all kinds of exercises to practice with the speaking well, with the use of words, which are still very popular, I think, or were at least, maybe they are not anymore that, in that sense, were very popular until very short. Think about the dictation, think about reading out loud, thinking about the school essay, or about the copying, about the school presentation before the other students. These were all kinds of exercises with language, exercises with speech, in order to in order to practice well, the speaking well. But I think it's really important to see that he did that, and that by doing that, he created a particular kind of time. Yes, he created, or he did that. He did that in the sense that the time in which you are studying and exercising is precisely the time outside of the concrete places and use the words. So it is not the marketplace. It is not in the. It is not in the councils. It is not in the court, but precisely in school. Yeah? It is in a situation where the use of these words have not the same effect as outside of the school. So that, in a certain sense, you precisely can exercise exercise the speech. So one of the commentators of the work of Isocrates said that is precisely what he did. He gave the gift of time to rhetorics. Yes, he made it possible. He made it possible to attend language, to pay attention to the words, to get interested in the words in a different way, separated from the usual time, from the time of the social time and the productive time and economic time and the psychological time. So outside of this time, a possibility to deal with that, what is so important in our lives, or in the lives of the Athenians, the word and the speech, that it becomes possible not only to develop a kind of ability to deal with the words, but that you also can get a certain distance to words. Precisely by writing and having the exercise, you are not any longer just subject to the forces of the speech. You become able to also relate to the speech, to take a certain distance to the speech. And also, I think very important also, what Isocrates also did is to attract the attention to the beauty of the language, to the beauty of the words. Again, something which is not about the use in the sense of the practical, immediate practical use, but precisely that what words can do and how beautiful language can be. So this creation of the school, or this invention of the school, enabled a certain experience of freedom, in the sense of a sense of freedom, sort of being able to begin, in this case, to begin with the language again. It is not something, the language we have learned, or which we know from outside the school. We can, in a certain sense, start with that language, with our mother tongue, you could say, again, a second time, and we can take a certain distance against this enormous force that is influencing our lives so strongly. And it happens, and now I'm going to formulate it a little bit in a different way. It happens so by grammatizing the world in which we act and live, in this case, in the language of the speech that we use, it becomes grammatized, and it is, and that is a phrase I also really want to emphasize, which I like very much, is it is put on the table. Yes, it is put on the table, meaning that the way in which speaking well is learned, is developed as a capacity, is in a way in which the transmission of knowledge, in transmission of the capacities or the competencies is always interrupted. It is always interrupted in the sense that, as I said, it is put on the table, it is grammatized in a certain way, it is materialized in a certain way and offered, so that the idea is not, the point is not to get as quick as possible and without friction what is in the hands and the heads of the teacher into the hands and the heads of the students, but by grammatizing it and putting it on the table is also to allow that it can be questioned. Yes, that it can be questioned. So it is not, you are not just listening to the language in this case, listening to the language anymore, only listening to it. You can also look at, you can reread it, what is said, so you can have a kind of different relation to the forces that are influencing your. And so I'm just going to see what is the. I'm sorry, I'm not so good at this. That using the PowerPoint at the same time that I'm speaking, and also speaking to a screen, which is always a very difficult, very difficult exercise. So I think what you in this example of and I will come back to that in a minute. In this example of although this invention is not an example, this invention of the school and the operations that I already indicated. So you can see what the main elements or the important elements of the school are, of the school form, are this form of bringing people and things together, in this case people and speech together, and what the operations are. But this is not only true for the world of speech, but it can be true for the world of nature, for the world of bodies, for the world of techniques. And I will show in a minute, I will show you some of these operations also in another context. Maybe just very briefly, that are what you could call a kind of basic or starting assumptions of the school and of the kind of learning, because there are many different forms of learning, but this school learning is a very artificial form of learning, a very particular form of learning, which is different from, as Lancieri very clearly also indicates, very different, for example, from the apprentice in the workshop. This is a scholastic learning, and the starting point of the scholastic learning, you could say there are two starting points which are very important, or two starting assumptions which are very important. So one is that you could say everybody can learn everything. That means that we don't know what a body or a mind are capable of. We don't know. Yes. So what someone can learn is not predefined, but also what someone has to learn is not naturally predefined, or there is no predestination. So everybody, in that sense, anyone can learn everything. And the second assumption, or second belief, you could say, that is characterizing the school is that it is materializing the belief, and I think that's a very important one also, that our children are not our children. It is a paraphrasing of what Khalil Gibran, the Lebanese poet, formulated. So it means that when you go to school, you are no longer a son or a daughter, but you become a pupil or a student like anyone else. So you are not a son or a daughter of your, let's say, natural father or mother or your family, but you are also not the son or the daughter of a nation. You are no son or daughter. You become a pupil. You become a student, and it means also that school is not not an instrument. It's not to be seen as an instrument to shape youngsters to the image that we as an older generation would have, but it is precisely to create, and let me just come back very briefly to, do this image. So the school here is the middle, is the point, it is in the middle. The school is creating this middle from where you can find your own way. So it is not bringing you to a fixed destination, a destination that would be defined by the older generation, but it is creating the conditions in order for yourself to find your own way. Of course, we know very well that this element or this central element of the school is something which is, of course, a kind of risky business. So that means that societies that, on the one hand, societies that organize schools, that they take a risk because they offer the possibility for youngsters to go in different ways. But I think that in many cases there are a lot of attempts to precisely for that reason to try to tame the school, to try to make it not able anymore to block its possibility of emancipation, you could call it, of the possibility to offer the abilities and the time in order to find your own way. And I go because it takes a longer time or so to take up more in general, I'm just going to list, and I'm not going to go in each of them, but just to list up what are the operations of the time of the school. So the operations of the so it is, and think about this image. Think about this image of the of going from the home to the middle, and then have different ways. So it is a matter of separation and departure. You separate yourself, and it is a separation also from the household and from society. It is a place of departure. It is a matter of suspension. A matter of suspension, meaning that the usual order, is for some time not destroyed or destructed, but suspended. It means that it is put out of order temporarily. As I just said, one of the examples would be of this suspension. There are many ways in which there is a kind of suspension, but one would precisely be that what is suspended is the force of the family. You are no longer son or daughter, but you become a student. So it suspends your, in a certain sense, your background, or you become a student like anyone else. It is a matter of profanation, meaning that, think about the example of Isocrates, that the language, in his case, that speech is in a certain sense put out of function. It is not functioning anymore like it is functioning outside of school. It is profanated in order to make it, it is brought to the table in order to be able to study it. It's offered in a way that you can, that it becomes an object of attention. Attention in the sense of to attend it, to come near, to come near to the language, to the world of words, the world of the language. It is also world disclosing. It is in this case disclosing the world of language, but in other contexts is the world of nature and the world of mathematics, the world of numbers, the mathematics, the world of sports, or it can be different worlds that are disclosed in a certain way. And it is disclosed in a way that, as I said already before, that it is grammatized, so that it is, in a certain sense, you could say that it is materialized in a way that you can study it, that you are not just involved in it in a certain sense, but that it becomes indeed the kind of object before you that you can study. That's what we call this grammatization. But it is also brought in a way, or put on the table in a way that it can also start to interest you. Yes, that you can start to get taken away by it, that you can have an access to the beauty, in this case, of the words and the language. And so it is not only offered in a sort of in a grammatized way, but it is also offered, you could say, to a certain extent, in a beautiful way, in a way that can attract, that can interest you, that can interest you in a way that it starts to speak, you could say, that it starts to speak, that the numbers start to speak, that the birds that you study start to speak, that the techniques start to speak, that it starts to say something, and there the aesthetization of that what is put on the table, and I think is very important. It is a matter of equality and emancipation. I already indicated it very briefly. So a matter of equality in the sense that when going through the school gate, you become a student like all others. And so in a certain sense, there is a kind of suspension of your background and your context when you are addressed as a student like all others, which is something that I think today is very much threatened, that it is precisely not going on today. And it is a matter of love. Yeah, and I'm going too slowly. So this may be something that we can take up also in the discussion. So let me just show. So to make it a little bit less abstract, but so here you can see, and so it's putting the world on the table, trying to make a particular kind of time that brings you near the world or worlds in some way that enable you to begin to start with that world and to get a certain competency to deal with these worlds. And so I just give here these examples. This is a kind of, we could say, a kind of profanation of the motor which is taken out of the car, put on the table literally in order to be able to exercise your hands and your eyes in dealing with the motor. And it's put on a table in a school context, so not in the context of a garage, which is the workshop of the apprentice, where it would be immediately also part of a kind of economic, productive context. Here in the school time is precisely not productive time. It is the time of the profanation, of taking out of this economic time, so that it becomes free in a certain way in order to exercise our hands and our eyes in dealing with it. You see here the example of the this is grammatization of language, so to bring speech into, or to create the possibility to study speech by grammatizing it, to be enabled. I assume that you also know these kind of tables, which are showing, in this case, the kind of birds that you can find in the prairie birds. It is a kind of grammatization of nature, offering you in a way that you can study it, because in nature you will never find these birds together in the same place at the same time, but these are brought together here in a certain way together, so that you can start to study, that you can start to compare, for example, how they look like, color, and so on. So these are the elements of the, you could say, the suspension, the profanation, the grammatization, that where something is put on the table in the middle, to pay attention to it, and to enable people to start to begin with the world in a different way. I'm going too slow. Maybe to say something about the role of the teacher in making this free time happen, making free time in the sense not of the so free time in the sense, maybe I can translate it best in the way that Hannah Arendt translates this notion of scholar. She translates, which is the notion of time, she translates it as it is time for the world. So it is the time that is freed to deal with the world. So not with society. Society is already enclosing worlds in a certain way, but for the world, for example, as we see the world of language. And so the role of the teacher in making this free time happen, in creating the conditions of freedom and equality, I think the teacher plays an important, very important role in different ways. I'm also not going to go into much detail here. Maybe refer to three things. One would be to say that I think it is important to look at the way, or to pay attention to the way the teacher speaks, the ways, so the school talk, you could say, the way that the teacher speaks, which is performing something and is contributing to the happening, to making the gathering into a happening of school. And I think it is important to pay attention to particular ways of speaking, and maybe one of the most characteristic phrases that a teacher uses is this phrase of try. Yes. Is to say to students, try. And it is by using this phrase, try, that the teacher is also creating a certain kind of time. Because if you say try, in a certain sense, what you say is, okay, as a teacher, there can be many reasons why you would not do something. And there can be, and one of the reasons can be that you don't like it, that you think it is not something for you, or not for the kind of people that you are, or from the kind of background that you come, or for the kind of previous education that you had, that you don't, that there can be many reasons why you would not do something. But I think the teacher is precisely saying this can all be true, but please try and try again. Saying the try is creating a particular kind of time, and is bringing the one to who you say to try, is bringing them into a certain present. So this notion of try, I think, is very important. Another very characteristic gesture in this case, you could say, of the teacher is maybe, I don't know if that is also for you again, but one could be what I call here the finger, is to say the finger not to correct, not the finger to correct, but the finger when you say, oh, pay attention. So this gesture, this very simple gesture is in a certain sense also helping to create a certain kind of time. And just give these examples as elements of what are part of what the teacher is doing in order to make this free time happen. And then another thing is, apart from the try and the pay attention, trying to create a certain attention, is, I think, that the teacher also is important in to make the worlds speak. So to make the animals speak, make the numbers speak, make the words speak, so that they, in a certain sense, also can get a certain authority, that they can start to say something to us and do something to us. Also, this we can go into this more in detail in the discussion and in the questions. And a last thing that I wanted to say is about what I think is one of the reasons that I think we have to defend the school, or to say it in a different way, that the school is threatened in a certain way, is threatened in many ways. It is, of course, threatened and tamed in the ways that we constantly try, or that there is constantly a try to define the kind of people that should come out of the school, the kind of competences that they should have. It is making out of the free time of the school a kind of production time, a kind of producing that what we want. But something I think is also important to mention is what is happening today, is what you could call the development of personalized learning environments, which are helped, of course, which are the creation of these personal learning environments are very much supported by the digital, which, starting with the personal computer, also imply that you can have a kind of personal trajectories, not a collective trajectory as is happening in the school. And just to refer to a few elements of these personalized learning environments. So these learning environments, they are always outcome oriented. So I don't know how that is in the Brazilian context, but in the European context, the educational programs are now translated in learning outcomes, and also developed starting from learning outcomes. So we define the learning outcomes, and then we see the learning as a kind of production process that brings this, that has to bring about these predefined outcomes. So which means that the school time, which was a time which in a certain sense was separated from production time, where the production of a certain outcome was not the first aim, but where the first aim is to get in touch, you could say, with certain worlds and to try to get engaged in the care of certain worlds. Think about Isocrates, the world of language, the world of speech, to take care of the worlds and of the language. That, and so to out of the context of immediate effect and production, that we now see that the learning becomes itself a production process, and so that there is no separation anymore between production time and school time. These personalized learning environments, they are now also, and I don't know how the situation is in Brazil. I cannot, it's difficult for me to evaluate the situation, but it means that more and more the schools are using all kinds of programs that are based on tracking, profiling, algorithms that offer all kinds of exercises to students and that are personalized, meaning that they take into account through what is called learning analytics, that they take into account the characteristics of a certain student, the personal characteristics of a certain student, and the personal history, learning history of a certain student, in order to offer all kinds of personalized exercises with the aim to have a kind of, with the aim to accelerate, you could say, the learning process, make it more effective, more productive, more efficient. So that you see that the kind of time that is now becoming part of learning is a very different time than the school time. And I have to apologize, but because I have too much. I will not do that anymore. Yeah. I apologize a little bit, but you will have seen that it is. I have really difficulty with speaking before a screen and getting into a screen while seeing almost nobody. But let me just make a kind of last remark. So maybe let me because that is maybe that has been maybe the most clear that I have said, because I realized that it was maybe a little bit confusing, but maybe the most important things that I have said, you can relate it probably to what I said about Isocrates. So we are captured in a stream or in streams, and in this case, the stream of speech. And school is creating, or was creating, a certain middle where you were able to create a certain suspension of this tremendous force, in order to be able to study it and to develop a certain freedom with regard to these forces that influence our life so strongly. And this time to study and exercise was offered to all, principle to all, starting from these two assumptions: everybody can learn everything, and our children are not our children. So it means that you are not predefined, and that your past and your social context is not defining who and what you have to become or can become. I think that what is going on today, or the threatening today, is precisely, and so these digitized learning environments are very strongly contributing to that, is to make learning into a production process, to not allow or to diminish the possibility to take a distance to the forces that influences our lives, but to accelerate, not to slow down, but to accelerate to accelerate the process. So not offering you a particular kind of time outside of production time, or different at least for production time. And also, I think that these personalized learning environments, different from what the scholastic starting point is, always try to define the future starting from the past. And so the learning analytics is maybe the best example of it. So I assume that you know what learning analytics is about. So we are analyzing, and then so you can take an example of an automated learning process. So if you want to learn Spanish, or if you want to learn Dutch or English, you can use all kinds of programs that help you to learn it, automated. So these automated programs, they offer you personalized exercises on the basis of what you have performed before. So it makes your past defining your future. Yes, it is analyzing your past and what you did before in order to define what you are able to. It defines what you are able to, and then offers you that. So it is defining your future based on your past. And I think what the school exactly is doing is precisely the opposite. It is trying to not make your past, in whatever way, defining your future, but it is opening up the line, you could say, the line from the past to the future. It is opening up the future. So think about what I said about try. Try is saying there can be all kinds of reasons, and yes, it did not work. It did not work then, but try again and try again, assuming that you are able, or at least that you can start again. And so I think what is happening today is precisely also attacking these scholastic starting points in creating all kinds of environments that attach pasts, or that attach people to their pasts, rather than opening up futures. Okay, I really apologize for a bit confused presentation, probably, but I hope that some of the things that I said can help to clarify some of the things that you maybe have discussed in the study groups, because that was my starting point. So therefore, it was not a very systematic presentation that I offered because I took as a starting point that you had read these texts, and so I just tried to offer some additional elements to maybe clarify some of the elements. Okay, I will stop here.
Não, eu acho que o que eu vou falar agora vai ser traduzido, né? Então, Ian, você está ouvindo, você está tendo a tradução em...
I can hear you. I can hear you in English.
Ok, então, ao contrário, você falou exatamente o que a gente esperava, né? Assim, no sentido de complementar as nossas leituras e debater com as questões que surgiram ao longo do estudo dos seus textos e ainda adicionar certas coisas, como tudo que você colocou do Sócrates, que essa eu não conhecia, né? Eu já li vários textos teus, mas a presença tão forte do Sócrates eu não conhecia. Mas então foi ótimo. Eu acho que a Aline, não sei como que está, assim, se você quisesse fazer uma rodada, por conta da hora, assim, uma rodada de algumas questões, para a gente passar para o Ian e aí finalizar, pode ser assim? Eu não sei se você tem questões.
Nós temos uma pergunta aqui, que é da Luciana Soldi, que é uma pergunta longa. Talvez a gente possa começar por ela. Eu também reservei uma aqui, acho que eu vou tentar acrescentar, vou ler aqui a da Luciana Soldi e vou vendo se faz sentido o que eu ia falar também para agrupar. Vamos lá. Olá, professor Masschelein. Estamos nesse contexto de resultados, checagem, produtividade, instrumentalização, transformação de currículos em itinerários mais personalizados. E aqui ela se refere ao Brasil, né? A última reforma de ensino no nosso país preconiza isso. Minha pergunta é como equacionar as tensões que advêm desse processo, que exaure tudo e todos. Ao mesmo tempo, as questões multiculturais que atravessam tanto a realidade das escolas públicas em grandes centros metropolitanos e em países com forte fluxo de migrantes. E, ao mesmo tempo, a razão de ser da escola, que durante a pandemia ficou evidente. Parece-me que estamos num momento de grande impasse. Para onde a escola irá? Há movimentos na Bélgica de reação na direção do que o senhor propõe a pensarmos? Eu teria uma pergunta também, mas eu acho que era um pouquinho... Okay. Oh, sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
Acho que ficamos com essa então, e aí depois eu faço a outra se sobrar um tempinho, pode ser?
Yeah. Yeah, so I can recognize, of course, what you say. So my talk has mainly about what could be a kind of other way to think about the school, but of course this is precisely because we are in the same situation as you sketch. So that there is a kind of the way in which learning is getting and school is let's say attacked, if you want, or at least is threatened in many ways, or is taking shape in many ways. It is this transformation into a learning environment, and there are many forces that are that are working into that direction. I think one is the digital. So I am not at all opposed to any digital technology. We are using it now, and we all know that you can do fantastic things with the digital. But we should really not ignore that the digital, the way it is putting us precisely. You could make a kind of comparison maybe with what I said about Isocrates. Yes, you could say that in the context of Athens, people lived in a stream of sounds. Yes, there was constantly speech, you could say. You lived in the speech, in the stream of the sound. What we see today, maybe you could say we live in the stream of images. We live in the stream of images. Even the texts are now images. It is what you see on your phone or whatever, everything becomes an image, and everything becomes a message, so to say. So you live in a stream again. And to live in, yeah, you can, to live in that stream, you can, what we see today, I think, is that how can you make this stream even more productive? So how can you to make it productive? But I think the school should be a way to try to get a kind of distance towards this stream, yes? So that we are enable, just like you could say that Isocrates invented, of course, with the help of the alphabetic writing, a way to also not just be in the stream, but also have a relationship to the stream. And I think the school should be a way also, or to try also to find ways to relate to this stream and to the feeling, I think, that we have, that we are part of a stream, of an endless stream in which we are taken, and so where we have where it is very difficult to have a kind of relation to it. So that's one thing. There is maybe another thing that is related also to the digital, although again not to the digital per se. That is that the way in which the digital functions, and especially also the social media, in a very broad sense, the social media, that in this working of the social media, that it is very difficult, and certainly for young people, it has become very difficult to have another source of value, you could say, than social value, or than the value of social recognition. So if I take it to the pandemic, you mentioned, or the one who said the question said also that maybe in the pandemic we recovered a little bit of the importance of school, and so we became conscious again about the importance of school. So in Belgium and in different places in Europe, during the pandemic, something very strange happened, because it were precisely students that said that they wanted to go to school. So in a very big survey in Belgium, in the fourth or the fifth month of the pandemic, I don't recall it exactly, 75% of the youngsters said that they would want to go to school. And of course, there was this idea that to go to school is maybe also to see their friends. Yes, of course, that's true. It was also to see their friends. But I think it was precisely also because if school works as a school, there is a kind of experience of freedom, a certain experience of equality, and a certain experience of something that is important outside of the social recognition, that there is a world or things that can be important, and that it is not only the social recognition that is important. I think that these things, when the school is working as a school, that are the kind of experiences that school can offer to youngsters, and that what they were longing for was to not be enclosed in their homes, to be subjected to their families in a certain way, to have a kind of freedom of being recognized as a student like any other student, a certain kind of equality, and a certain certain freeing of their peers, so to say. Because at school, you are not with your peers, or not at all, not only with your peers. There is also always the teachers, or there are the teachers. So it is not a kind of peer situation in that sense. So that is, I think, something we should really think about. Why did they want to go to school? Why did they want to go to school? Why do youngsters want to go to school? And so, yeah, I think that it offers a particular, or it can offer a particular kind of time that allows some experience that you can not have in another context. Now, but I'm talking and talking and talking. So, yeah, you mentioned so many things also about you refer to the issue of the migration. And the diversity. I think that school, that the starting point of the school, I'm not saying that it in fact it is always operating like that, but that the starting point of the school is a certain equality that so starts from the assumption that everybody is able. Yes, everybody is able. That is not denying differences, even not differences in background, differences in culture, differences and so on, social differences. That is not denying them, but it is trying to avoid to take them as a starting point, not to start from there. Because if you start from there, what you do, always again, is trying to define who the student is. You are so and so. You are so and so. You coming from that background. You coming from that culture. You coming from that neighborhood. You coming from that. So you define, and then you say, so you say, you are so and so and so, and we can use all kinds of social science survey methods and all kinds of psychological tests and whatever to diagnose who you are. We can have surveys about where you come from and so on. So we can define you. We say, so you are so and so, and thus now we offer you this. I think that the school is precisely the opposite. It is starting from undefining, not from defining. It is undefining. It is saying this can all be true, but we can create a moment. We can create moments where these things are suspended. Moments. And when they are suspended, for example, when we lose ourselves in a moment together in something, a moment, we lose ourselves. At that moment, something new could begin. I'm not saying that it always begin, but it could begin. It could begin. And it is creating these moments, I think, is shaping a kind of equality in starting with something which is not denying the differences, but not taking them as a starting point. So not saying we have to know who you are and what you want. No, it is in a certain sense irrelevant, because it is time for the world. What is interesting is not you, but that we have to take care of language, that we have to take care of mathematics, that we have to take care of nature. That of these worlds, that is what is important. That is what school is about. And it is to enable you to get fit to take care of the world, to take fit to take care of language, to speak well, to to count well, to count good. So that is not just because you can do something with the counting to get for your interest, but because language requires your respect. The numbers require your respect, your care. They need it in order to live, so to say. The world needs your care. So I think that's a very different starting point, but there are many tendencies in many sectors of our lives that are pushing in a very different way. So it's very difficult, I think, to make school today. But on the other hand, I still believe that there are, even in these harsh conditions, many moments where school happens, where you bring together. I was not part of your study group, of course, but I can really imagine that if it works, then you create a time within time, where so you create a kind of hole in the time, and that are the moments that it happens. So that the gathering becomes a happening, and I think it still happens also in classrooms with students, with pupils, with children. It still happens, but there are a lot of forces to try to tame it and to interrupt it, or to get rid of it in a certain sense, because it is, of course, also always a little bit losing your time. It is not always very productive or effective or efficient. So,
Bom, antes eu queria avisar, pessoal, antes de ir para a próxima pergunta, que nós temos alguns minutos finais. Eu sei que conforme o Jan vai falando, às vezes, né, vai suscitando na gente novas questões, mas nós temos aqui um limite, né, um teto de horário que a gente gostaria de respeitar. Então, se alguém tiver alguma nova pergunta e quiser mandar, temos só mais alguns minutos. Estamos também entendendo que algumas perguntas que aparecem acabam sendo respondidas pela fala do Jan, então vamos passar por algumas. E aí agora, então, eu vou fazer duas perguntas que me parece vão falar dessa ideia de sala de aula e atuação do professor nela. A primeira é da professora Gilda, e ela faz referência aqui à imagem da sala de aula dentro da caverna. Que, segundo ela, lembra o livro do Paulo Freire, Cartas à Guiné-Bissau, em que ele conta a experiência de alfabetizar pessoas embaixo de árvores. E eu adicionaria a esta pergunta a relação entre a forma escola e o professor, que é uma pergunta, inclusive, que eu carrego comigo há bastante tempo, depois de ter lido bastante o Jan, né? A minha pergunta é, há algo da forma escola que permanece sem o professor? Eu entendo, o Jan traz muito as imagens da materialidade da escola, as paredes, a carteira, a lousa, mas eu fico sempre com a impressão de que quem escolariza ou desescolariza a escola é o professor, é essa figura. Então, queria entender se é isso mesmo ou não, se existe essa centralidade na figura do professor, no sentido de escolarizar ou desescolarizar a escola. Ou se não, se há algo da forma escola que existe a despeito do professor. Enfim, eu fico com essas duas, acho que a gente já pode ir por aí. Se aparecerem outras coisas, a gente coloca mais para frente.
Yeah, it would take me a very long time to go into that question, so I'm not going to do that. I hope that maybe in the future we will have an occasion to speak, not through the screen, but in another way together and talk about it. But let me say a few things. So I think that the teacher the role of the teacher. The role. So we really have to, because of course, if we think about the teacher, we immediately think about the adult who is in a classroom with minors. But if we think not about the teacher in that way, but about the teacher as the role of the teacher, so the role of the teacher, then I think that for school to happen, the role of the teacher is important, is a crucial role. But youngsters or pupils, in a certain sense, can be teachers for other students or for the teacher in the sense of the adult themselves. So if we think about the role of the teacher, I think, yes, the school form needs the teacher. But it can be, concretely, it can be different persons. I'm not sure whether it could be also non-persons. I'm not sure about that, but anyway, it could be other persons, because I think the teacher is really, and so this thing about the teacher is to speak the language of ability, and so can to what I call this try. So I think somebody, to say try, I think is very important. To attract attention or to enable attention, I think is something very important. And I could give an example, an example of my grandson, who is almost 2 years old, and every time that there is a certain kind of music on the radio, he makes this move. Yes, he makes this every time. So when we are there and he makes this move, it makes us also stop. So it makes us pay attention to what is on the radio. So it's a very simple gesture, but in some sense, the gesture is needed to attract attention. Just to give a very stupid example in a certain sense, but so I think that there are gestures, there are words, there are ways of speaking, there are ways of attract attention that are necessary to make school happen. That is another point, is who or what is performing this. I think that can be very different. But in that sense, the teacher, I think, is an important figure, and the figure that is putting something on the table, so bringing something to our attention and to our study. So in that sense, I think the teacher is a crucial figure. Yeah. It is very different from saying a kind of, I can personally, of course, learn and study many things, of course, yeah. But that's scholastic learning, I think, is a different kind of learning. It's not a full answer to what was the question, but maybe some indication of the direction.
Posso entrar com uma coisinha aqui? Lembrar, por exemplo, aquilo que Rancière fala sobre por que o mestre ignorante permanece sendo um mestre. E ele ressalta o fato de que esse mestre não se coloca como uma mediação necessária entre o aluno e o conhecimento, entre a inteligência dos dois, mas ele opera fundamentalmente na vontade deste aluno, né? Na sua disposição para o mundo, para o aprendizado, e na sua disposição para romper aquilo que ele chama do círculo da impotência, que seja justamente eu não posso, eu não sou capaz, ou para usar a expressão que o Jan usa toda hora, isto não é para mim, né? Ele é a força do tente, né? Tente, eu acredito, rompa, faça o círculo da potência daquele que se coloca como um igual, né? Me parece que isso também é sempre eu não sei se um objeto poderia agir tanto sobre a nossa vontade. Os objetos agem mais sobre o nosso desejo, né? Então eu vejo algo e eu tenho um desejo, mas essa vontade, essa disposição, né, para esse rompimento, me parece também, né, não sei como você vê isso, mas é um papel fundamental daqueles que estão lá, né, dos educadores de uma forma geral, né, não só daquele professor da sala de aula, mas dos que habitam uma escola, né? O Débora, não sei se temos tempo para mais ou se você pediu para fazer um breve encerramento, então você define se a gente vai para mais uma questão ou se eu vou para o encerramento muito breve que eu preparei.
Acho que a gente pode ouvir a pergunta do Bruno.
Perfeito.
E eu mesma, que fui super exigente com o tempo, estou fraca. Olha só o que eu... Mas nós vamos terminar num breve momento, mas talvez seja bom a pergunta do Bruno aparecer.
Vamos lá. O Bruno pergunta: num momento de tantas certezas e a necessidade de cada vez maior produtividade, como o senhor avalia a dúvida, o não saber, como um valor para o desenvolvimento da democracia? O senhor tem pensado sobre a experiência da dúvida e do não saber na relação com as democracias?
Yeah, I didn't. I went over the quote, I think, but I had a small quote of Isocrates, who was precisely saying to the sophists, because he wrote a little text which was called against the sophists. Yes, because he said that the sophists claimed that they could teach what you needed to live a good life. Yes, to live a successful life, that they were able to give you the answers, what you had to do. Yes, and Isocrates just questions this point. He says, we cannot know what is going to come, so we can never teach the students what they have to do to live a good life. That's the starting point. That's the starting point of a democracy. That's why we don't have the episteme, that we don't have the knowledge. We don't know, but we can exercise, we can have the epimeleia, we can have the care of trying to prepare ourselves, which means trying to shape, to keep ourselves awake. And to keep ourselves awake, we need all kinds of practices, like in the old times it was already, and I think today is the same, like diets. Yes, we need diets. Maybe today we need a diet of the social media. Maybe we need diets of all kinds of things in order to not to be able to produce a future, which we don't know. There is this doubt, there is this uncertainty about the future, but in order to be attentive and to create for us, or to be ourselves in a kind of condition that maybe we can, we can respond to situations when we are in the situations. So it's also, again, it's not an answer, but I think the question is in a certain sense the starting point of the democracy. So we don't know. So the democracy is meaning also we cannot fix it. We cannot define it in a certain sense. It had always again to be reconsidered. So I don't know if that is at least maybe a little bit of an answer to the question. But I think that the not knowing was precisely the not knowing how to live one's life, at least in the sense of the future. That was precisely the starting point for Isocrates to say, that is not what we have to do. We don't have to say what you have to do. We cannot know what you have to do. Impossible to know. That would be a claim that is false.
Professor José Sérgio.
Bom, em face aí do desafio da Débora de falar uma coisinha final, né? Eu me perguntei o que significa para a gente hoje, no Brasil, nesse contexto, tomar uma posição, tal como Jan Masschelein fala, de defender e desejar a escola. E eu fui encontrar uma resposta, pelo menos para mim, satisfatória, no final de um texto da Hannah Arendt, que não é o texto sobre a crise da educação. Eu também aviso que o Masschelein provavelmente conhece esse texto, porque ele é um estudioso também do pensamento da Arendt, mas é o texto sobre a crise na cultura. E ao final desse, que para mim é um dos mais belos ensaios que a Arendt escreve, ela se faz uma pergunta, que ela diz: o que é, portanto, uma pessoa culta? E para responder, ela vai escolher um personagem do passado, Cícero, né? Um grande pensador romano, e talvez aquela pessoa que pela primeira vez usa o termo cultura, cultivo da alma, nesse sentido que a gente usa um pouco de tornar-se uma pessoa culta, né? Cultura ali deixa de ser só a cultura, a agricultura ou o culto aos deuses, para ser também o cultivo do espírito humano. E ela afirma que ser uma pessoa culta não é ter tal ou qual conteúdo, mas ser capaz de escolher entre os acontecimentos do presente e do passado aqueles que te iluminam. Ser capaz de escolher entre os vivos e os mortos com quem você quer estar. E a referência a Cícero vem justamente isso, uma passagem que Cícero coloca em questão uma famosa frase de Aristóteles que diz: sou amigo de Sócrates, sou amigo de Platão, mas sou mais amigo da verdade. E ele diz, Cícero afirma, eu prefiro me perder, errar com Platão, do que estar, na verdade, com os seus detratores. Eu acho Platão a melhor companhia. E eu escolhi essa passagem porque me parece que, ainda que certas críticas à escola possam conter certas verdades, nesse exato momento é um ato de afirmação da nossa liberdade, da nossa capacidade de romper com os automatismos que nos amarram ao passado, a gente poder escolher a escola. E o que me reforça isto é que hoje eu olho para os grandes adversários políticos e vejo que eles escolheram o fim da escola. No Brasil, né, e talvez você saiba, acaba de passar uma lei favorável ao homeschooling, ao fim do tempo e do espaço da escola. E nessa hora, mais do que nunca, eu falo, eu não posso estar do mesmo lado que eles. Eu não posso estar do mesmo lado que eles. Então, me parece que escolher escola significa escolher esse tempo, esse espaço que aposta, né? Que crê, que olha para a liberdade, para a igualdade, para a emancipação, para usar uma expressão do seu texto, né, que eu gosto muito, essa capacidade de cada ser humano dar uma forma própria à sua vida e à sua existência. Eu acho que, para mim, escolher a escola hoje pouco importa se o sistema todo, se o fluxo das coisas apontam para o aprendizado individual, apontam para homeschooling, apontam, né, para qualquer outra coisa. Trata-se aqui de fazer uma escolha ética, uma escolha política, a partir dos nossos princípios, né? E eu acho que o que a sua reflexão traz sobre a potência da escola, a sua capacidade, é justamente isso. Vale a pena fazer essa escolha. Não importa, né, o que vem, o que os outros dizem, qual é o movimento social, né? É escolher com quem a gente quer estar. E eu acho que nós, professores, não podemos tomar outra posição, a não ser a escolha da defesa da escola. Desta escola que você nos traz, né? É isto. Débora, professores, Jan, um prazer estar aqui com você mais uma vez. Espero que possamos nos reunir novamente, presencialmente. E aí o Jan vai entender por que eu falei, mesmo sendo sexta-feira à noite, eu gostaria desse tempo e desse espaço, né? Foi isso.
Bom, eu tenho tempos muito complexos, fazem com que a gente tenha mesmo que ir separando o tempo, separando um tempo devido para pensar naquilo que a gente tem chamado de defesa da escola. Então, para os que leram os textos, para os que participaram desse grupo, há muito ainda para estudar e para pensar, para aqueles que não o puderam ou não o fizeram, essa conversa de hoje é um convite a isso, porque a gente tem decidido perder tempo com isso. Perder é um termo péssimo, mas eu quis aproveitá-lo, porque é isso mesmo que a gente tem decidido fazer, perder tempo com encontros de professores de vários segmentos, perder tempo com temas que são importantes para construir as nossas escolhas como escola. O professor Masschelein, durante muitos momentos, se desculpava por estar sendo lento, e eu ficava pensando, mas que horrível é isso da gente também achar que tem uma performance, que talvez seja o YouTube que está fazendo isso com a gente. Não, também fiquei pensando que não, que as suas pausas são pausas que nos permitem acompanhar o seu pensamento. Então, não se desculpe por isso, porque nós estamos decidindo juntos que todas estas formas próprias e singulares compõem também uma defesa dos modelos e das formas de aprender e de estudar. E a gente vive um privilégio aqui, com os modelos próprios do professor José Sérgio, do professor Masschelein, da Aline, da Mônica. Olha só o que acontece de bonito quando a gente se reúne. E de difícil, como o Zé Sérgio disse, neste mesmo mês, a gente tem uma ameaça tão importante, a defesa da suspensão do tempo, pela ideia de que o homeschooling possa substituir tudo isso que a gente ouviu e pensou aqui pela manhã. Então, queria agradecer ao professor Masschelein, aos seus livros. Eu disse já para ele o quanto foi importante quando eu encontro no livro do La Roça a citação dizendo que é leitura obrigatória no curso dele, o livro Em Defesa da Escola. Então, a gente tem uma rede em muitos lugares que vai criando essa força que o Bruno chamou de... Estão pensando isso na Bélgica? Sim, a tristeza é a resposta que eu dou ao professor Masschelein, que em nenhum momento a sua fala distanciou o Brasil e as suas complexidades, né? Quando a gente tem um professor que fala na pergunta sobre a escola pública, a gente traz também essa resposta em todo o cenário que a gente tem aqui de complexidade, com contornos diferentes, porque eu lembro aqui que a escola privada é uma concessão pública, Ou seja, nós não podemos sair dessa discussão. Então, gostaria de agradecer ao professor José Sérgio pelas suas vindas e aulas no Colégio Santa Cruz, pela ideia de um grupo que se dedique a estudar durante um grupo menor, com aulas abertas, a Aline e a Mônica que acompanharam todo esse percurso, aos nossos colegas da tecnologia e das exposições públicas que têm nos apoiado, a Carolina, que encontro bom com essa tradutora, que nem em São Paulo está, muito obrigada, ao professor Masschelein por sua produção crítica, que sustenta a nossa defesa, aos professores que estão aqui. Vamos tentar, gente, e tentar de novo. Vamos tentar e tentar de novo, de forma absolutamente firme e coletiva, e vamos perder tempo com isso. Aos que não vieram aqui, indiquem, lá vem a nossa realidade atual, nosso canal no YouTube, para que assistam essas aulas, a aula de abertura do professor José Sérgio. O grupo nós não vamos publicar, ele é presencial, e parte disso que defende a nossa defesa de que há momentos que não são filmados e publicados, mas as duas aulas, a de abertura e a final, com o professor Masschelein, estarão disponíveis, algumas já estão no nosso canal do YouTube. Muito obrigada a todos que ofereceram a sua manhã de sábado para essa suspensão de tempo aqui. E se você está perdido com esses conceitos todos, vá lá ler os textos que trazem aí essa profundidade. Um privilégio estar aqui. Mônica, Aline, José Sérgio, professor Masschelein, professor José Sérgio, muito obrigada, muito obrigada.